This story takes us back to 1960, when a young man named Uri Geller appeared on American and British television and demonstrated something that was considered impossible for an ordinary human being to do. This man claimed that his mind was so powerful that he could accomplish absolutely anything using the power of his brain. Yes, when he said anything, he truly meant anything. People were left completely stunned when he bent metal using nothing but the power of his mind. Spoons became soft in his hands. Keys bent with just the slightest touch of his finger. Compasses were forced to move simply because he told them to. His most astonishing ability was that he could draw pictures he had never even seen before. A volunteer would secretly draw a picture without showing it to him. Then Geller would use his special ability to recreate that same picture. Although his drawings were not always exact copies, they were similar enough to leave everyone amazed. But this raises an important question. How could a human being possibly do something like this? And these were only Geller's stage performances. Later in this video, after learning about his other incredible feats, you'll definitely be even more amazed. Who is Uri Geller? Did he really possess superhuman powers, or was it all just an elaborate deception? Welcome back once again to Noble's Creation. Uri Geller was born in 1946 in the Palestinian city of Tel Aviv, which is now part of Israel. When Geller was just 6 years old, one day his mother gave him a bowl of soup and a spoon to eat with. It was an ordinary day, but not for long. As soon as Geller picked up the spoon to eat his soup, it snapped and fell into the bowl. At first, his mother thought the spoon must have already been weak. But a few days later, the exact same thing happened again. That was the moment 6-year-old Uri Geller began to think that maybe the spoon wasn't the problem. Maybe he could actually make it happen again. In an interview, Uri Geller said that he later performed this same trick for his classmates at school. All of the children were completely amazed. Later, he also discovered that he had the ability to read other people's minds. At the age of 18, he joined the Israeli army. In 1967, he was wounded during the Six-Day War. After leaving the military, he began performing at small parties and nightclubs throughout Israel. He earned a living by demonstrating his extraordinary abilities. At first, many people believed he was simply a highly skilled street magician. They thought he was using sleight of hand to perform his tricks. However, people consistently failed to figure out how his tricks worked. Geller insisted that he was a psychic. He claimed that with the power of his mind, he could make the impossible possible. Later, he moved to the United States. That was where he began receiving widespread media attention. Most Americans first became familiar with Uri Geller in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when he started appearing on popular television shows and in magazines. On television, he demonstrated bending spoons with nothing more than the touch of his fingers. Viewers were often left speechless when the bowl of a spoon suddenly snapped off and fell to the floor. During many television appearances, he would tell the audience, "If your wristwatch has stopped working, take it off, hold it tightly in your hand, and I'll use my mental power to make it run again." Many people claimed that their watches actually started working again. For those watching, it was truly astonishing. By 1972, the media fascination surrounding Uri Geller had grown so intense that the scientific community also began paying attention. Scientists at the Stanford Research Institute wondered whether this man truly possessed superhuman abilities. They decided to test him in a laboratory to determine whether he was using tricks or deception. When they invited Uri Geller to participate in their research, he gladly accepted. For the next 5 weeks, 2 researchers named Harold Putoff and Russell Targ made Uri Geller the subject of their investigation. a series of unusual experiments were conducted on him in the laboratory. The first experiment at the Stanford Research Institute involved drawings.
Several pre-made drawings were sealed inside envelopes and placed in front of him. Uri was asked to look only at the envelopes and recreate the hidden pictures on a separate sheet of paper. It is worth mentioning that some of those drawings had already been seen by the researchers. However, other drawings had not been seen by the researchers either. Those were sealed inside envelopes by a third party before being brought into the laboratory. At the beginning, Uri Geller admitted that he felt somewhat uncertain about his abilities. Out of the 10 envelopes, he clearly stated that he could not determine the contents of 2 of them. However, after looking only at the remaining 8 envelopes from the outside, he drew images on a separate sheet of paper that turned out to be remarkably accurate. Although his drawings were fairly simple, they closely resembled the original pictures. In some cases, he even drew mirror images of the originals. Even so, they were still easily recognizable. For the researchers, it was an almost unbelievable moment. The researchers at Stanford decided to test another one of Uri Geller's claimed abilities. This experiment focused on sensing the contents of an object without actually seeing it, a process known as dowsing. For this test, 10 aluminum containers were placed in front of him. He was asked to identify which containers held an object inside. The experiment was designed in such a way that even the researchers themselves did not know which containers contained anything. A third party secretly placed an object inside a randomly selected container. The containers were then mixed thoroughly. Out of the 10 containers, 1 contained ball bearings, another contained magnets, a third held room temperature water, a fourth contained sugar. Each container was assigned a number. Without touching any of them, Uri had to identify which numbered containers actually contained an object. At first, Uri Geller spent quite a bit of time moving his hands over the containers. Then he began eliminating them one by one. As the experiments continued, his confidence steadily increased. Eventually, it reached the point where he could walk into the room and immediately identify the correct container without any hesitation. Remarkably, Uri Geller correctly identified every container that actually contained an object. He performed a similar experiment on the famous television show The Carson Tonight Show. Whenever he felt even the slightest uncertainty, he refused to give an answer. Even on the television show, he successfully gave the correct answers. For the audience, it was extremely difficult to believe what they were witnessing. Researchers Puthoff and Tark were deeply impressed by his performance. They stated that even if someone were simply guessing, the probability of consistently giving the correct answers would be only 1 in trillions. Another experiment that demonstrated Uri Geller's remarkable accuracy involved an ordinary 6-sided die. The die was placed inside a metal box. The box was shaken vigorously. Uri was then asked to predict which number would be facing upward when the lid was opened. The experiment was repeated a total of 10 times. On 2 occasions, he refused to answer. However, in the remaining 8 trials, he predicted the correct number with 100% accuracy. Uri Geller's metal bending demonstrations inside the Stanford laboratory were not nearly as impressive as his performance in the other experiments. Earlier, he had claimed that he could bend metal without touching it. But when he was asked to demonstrate that ability in the laboratory, he was unable to do so. When he was allowed to touch the objects lightly, he bent spoons, forks, and metal rods with his hands. However, this was considered scientifically useless as evidence. There was no way to determine how much physical force he had actually applied. Another experiment produced somewhat more interesting results. A 1-gram steel weight was placed on an electronic scale. Both the scale and the weight were covered with a glass enclosure so that Uri could not touch them. Even without making physical contact, Geller managed to alter the scale's reading. It was truly a very unusual result. After these tests, the researchers wrote in their report that Uri Geller had performed so successfully that the phenomenon deserved further scientific investigation. The two researchers even named this unusual ability the Geller effect. Uri Geller's personality and charisma earned him regular appearances on television shows and in magazines over the following years. Before long, he had become a supernatural superstar. The Stanford research appeared to support his claims to some extent.
As a result, even many people who had once doubted him began to believe in his extraordinary abilities. Then, another man entered the picture. He would become one of the biggest threats to Uri Geller's reputation. His name was James Randi. James Randi claimed that he could also make spoons become soft simply by touching them. In reality, James was a professional stage magician. He argued that bending spoons and keys could easily be done using sleight of hand. After every demonstration, James carefully explained each trick to his audience step by step. At the same time, he would say, "I'm not here to ruin Uri Geller's reputation. I simply want to prove that these are not paranormal powers. They're nothing more than clever sleight of hand." However, in reality, his goal was to expose Uri Geller. James Randi's claims had a major impact on Uri Geller's reputation. Even many of Geller's supporters began to have doubts. Over the following years, Geller appeared on television far less often. Even so, his income continued to grow. During that time, he began selling his dowsing services to oil companies. Whenever oil companies needed to locate underground oil deposits, they hired Uri Geller. Geller would confidently point out where drilling would most likely be successful. In return, he charged the oil companies very large fees. By then, Geller had realized that performing on stage would only keep him surrounded by controversy. So he decided to sell his abilities where they would be more valuable. In one interview, Geller even claimed that he had worked for Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, for many years. According to him, they used his abilities in an effort to solve various complicated cases. In 1973, the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, also tested Uri Geller's abilities. After the tests, CIA agents reportedly said they found no evidence of trickery or deception in Geller's performances. Later, the CIA also used Geller in several of its missions. In 2013, the BBC produced a documentary titled The Secret Life of Uri Geller, the Psychic Spy. The documentary claimed that Geller served as a psychic spy for the CIA. According to the documentary, he had actually been recruited by Mossad. It also claimed that he was sent to Mexico on a special mission. This was during the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were constantly trying to outmaneuver each other. At that time, some KGB agents, members of the Soviet Union's intelligence agency, were operating in neighboring Mexico. Their mission was to monitor CIA activities. They stored all of the information they gathered on floppy disks without ever touching them. However, many people believed the documentary greatly exaggerated these claims. That said, Uri Geller's predictions were not always correct. He had a personal rule. Whenever he was not completely certain about something, he refused to give an answer. On several occasions, that decision also damaged his popularity. In 1988, a British businessman offered him £250,000 if he could bend a spoon under controlled laboratory conditions. However, Geller never accepted the challenge. Because of that, some people claimed he must have been hiding something. They argued that was the reason he refused to take the challenge. To this day, however, Geller continues to insist that his abilities are genuinely supernatural. At the same time, He also admits that some of his demonstrations can be explained through stage magic or natural science. For example, he says that a stopped watch may begin working again after being held in someone's hand for a few minutes because of body heat and natural hand movements. He does not consider that to be psychic power. However, his alleged ability to read minds, to identify a picture sealed inside an envelope, or to correctly predict the position of a die inside a closed box remains a mystery to this day. Uri Geller is now 78 years old. His popularity has declined significantly. Perhaps as he has grown older, his powers have weakened as well. Even today, if he is in a good mood, he will occasionally perform small demonstrations by bending spoons and forks or making a compass move. However, he now avoids performing for large crowds. Recently, several videos have surfaced in which it appears that Uri Geller is using techniques commonly employed by stage magicians. One example is the use of a fake thumb. Even so, no solid evidence has ever been found that conclusively proves all of his feats were fraudulent. He owns a 1976 Cadillac known as the Geller effect. The body of the car is covered with countless bent spoons and forks. What makes them unique is that every spoon and fork was once used by a famous person from somewhere in the world. What do you think about Uri Geller's extraordinary abilities? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. One example is the use of a fake thumb. Even so, no solid evidence has ever been found that conclusively proves all of his feats were fraudulent. He owns a 1976 Cadillac known as the Geller effect. The body of the car is covered with countless bent spoons and forks. What makes them unique is that every spoon and fork was once used by a famous person from somewhere in the world. What do you think about Uri Geller's extraordinary abilities? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. I hope you'll also give this video plenty of likes and shares. I'll see you in the next amazing video.